Revelation 1930. From the 25th of May 1941. Spiritual activity, the most important thing. Task. Sacrificiality. The constant teaching and thus also the constant listening to oneself will bring great success. The teaching powers give the human being a spiritual treasure of knowledge which can never be used up, for whatever is given away only contributes to the teaching and thus to the increase of spiritual knowledge without, however, diminishing the spiritual property of the former. And that is divine will and his gift of grace, which the human being can use and increase as he sees fit. But this good must always be used beneficially. The human being must never believe that it is enough for him to enrich himself with it, then he runs the risk that the source of knowledge will dry up, that he will no longer be allowed to draw from it either, and that the influx of divine grace will cease. For it is also divine will that spiritual knowledge be spread, and the human being himself must use every opportunity to spread the gift entrusted to him, that is to pass on the knowledge he has received himself. For only then is this an activity in love for the neighbor. Admittedly, this is again a gift of grace which people do not deserve as long as they do not desire it themselves. And yet they should at least be given knowledge so that they can decide for themselves whether they want to strive for it or reject it. And therefore the admonition is sent to them again and again to remember their soul. Every spiritual work brings spiritual, that is eternal success, because it is constant, and what the human being has once absorbed can no longer be taken away from him eternally. Spiritual activity is therefore the only important thing before God. All misgivings should be silent towards it, for anyone who takes spiritual good into himself fully and completely fulfills the earthly task given to him, provided he also passes this good on to his neighbor with love. Thus he need never fear that he has not made sufficient use of his time if he is committed to spreading that which God himself imparts to him, and which must therefore also be the most important thing because God himself gives it to him. Receiving the messages from above is connected with a task, that is, receiving depends on the will to fulfill this task, thus the intention must then also be carried out. Only taking and giving makes the gift of God what it is. For this forms the human being's own intellectual activity, and only through this does the human being receive the blessing of what he has received, otherwise it would remain dead words without strength and influence on the human being. For what the human being receives only becomes spiritual property when he himself has received it with his heart, that is, when the content of what he has been given has been mentally worked through by himself and is now affirmed. Only then can he pass it on as living truth. He can represent what he says with conviction and likewise stimulate his fellow human being to thought activity, so that he too is receptive and accepts the divine gift as food and drink. Furthermore, the willingness to fulfill a mission that requires sacrifice belongs to the acceptance of the divine word. For in order to be able to distribute God's gift, the human being must be able to give up everything earthly, because he should present the same to his fellow human beings. He must be exemplary in earthly conduct, that is, live according to the word which he now proclaims. And this requires the willing surrender of all earthly pleasures. It requires a strong self-conquest to fight against everything that offers earthly pleasure. For the easier the human being gives it up, the more receptive he is for the precious good which is offered to him from above. And thus he can also spread it more convincingly the deeper he has penetrated himself. Only when the human being makes sacrifices is he enabled to serve God, and then the work will be assigned to him as he is able to accomplish it. But then success will not fail to come. The work of the teachers in the beyond will spread far and wide through the cooperation of earthly people, and thus the divine word will be spread wherever people are willing to accept it and make an effort to follow the example of the messenger, and thus give up what earthly possessions mean in order to exchange spiritual possessions in abundance. Amen.